where uranium is found have assumed importance. A lot of depends on the location and topography of a country will also reflect this concept of national power. And also, foreign policy makers find location to be a key determinant for this concept of power. So, topographic features determine boundaries between nations, whereas artificially created boundaries, as between India and Pakistan or Germany and France, can weaken the position. The natural frontiers, such as high mountains and sea, help the power of a state. And also, there are some types of natural resources constitute another element of power. Possession of a natural resources such as oil, uranium, and various minerals add to the power of a state. Today, the importance of oil-rich Gulf has increased. Besides, those possessing items like coal and iron can enhance their power. Nations can improve their power with having these natural resources. If, on account of their natural resources, they can give rewards in the form of minerals, agriculture products, or manufactured goods. And also, military is the fifth tangible element of a power, is the uh, military strength. This relates to the conventional nation that power is backed by military force. So the military strength of a given nation state can be measured in terms of funds expended for defense and security purpose. So a related factor is location outside its territory. Such military mobility hinges on the nation state's ability to sustain military operations and land, sea, and air. So the ultimate success of a nation state, however, would depend on intangible factors such as preparedness, training, leadership, and moral, etc., which affect the performance of armed forces in a given situation. So this discussion of tangible elements of power brings out clearly that such elements are necessary to generate capability of a nation states in a sovereign state system. But this is not sufficient to ensure that capabilities would lead to the overall strength of the nation states. We need to specify the intangible elements of power that contribute in a most critical way to the overall capability of sovereign state. So we have the concept of balance of power. So a state of stability amongst two or more contending powers is referred as a balance of power. In international relations, maintaining of equilibrium between the states of alliances are to prevent or check on attaining absolute power by other state or group of states is termed as the balance of power. So the primary objective behind the balance of power remains to limit a state or a group of states from imposing their authorized or illicit will uh, upon other countries in the region as well as global state system. So in this manner, international or regional order is maintained whereby different geostrategic moves from any state are significantly checked and balanced by others. So, no doubt, realists and non realists have primarily used the concept of balance of power in international relations. However, its history is as old as human civilization, since the ideology of realism and neo realism is mainly guided by the principle of self preservation, and hence the balance of power provides a mile for the survival to the weaker states in the system. So the notion of balance of power in international relations is defined in different ways. Some of the well-known definitions of the concept are stated as we discussed. Hans J. Marganto has defined the concept as whenever the term is used without qualification, it refers to an actual state of affairs in which power is distributed among several nations which approximate equality. And one of the famous American historian, Sidney B. Fay, has defined this concept as balance of power is such a just equilibrium in power among the members of the family of nations as will prevent any one of them from becoming sufficiently strong to enforce its will upon others. So, according to Palmer and Perkins, also defined the concept of balance of power, assumes that through shifting alliances and countervailing pressures, no one power or combination of powers will be allowed to grow so strong as to threaten the security of the rest. So, uh, so the concept of balance of power has given a round of applause for maintaining the peace and security through restricting aggressiveness of the aggressor. Throughout the history, balance of power has remained a success in ensuring the global peace and security. The structure of the balance of power has often protected the diverse interests of smaller and weaker nations against the dominant states. Through war is categorized as a significant tool in maintaining the balance of power. However, continually various clashes and conflicts among global states are settling down through the peace negotiations as well. It is widely accepted that the states often try to gain maximum power through military aggression, seizure of territory, and alliance formations. So, in this way, the states endeavor to safeguard their interests without caring for the interest of smaller or weaker states in the world. So, there are many opinions which can be put forward against the concept of this balance of power, like nations find it hard to break alliances. Single power dominance can also ensure global peace. A difficulty in maintaining mutual consensus amongst two or more strong states, etc. Therefore, it can be rightly said that the balance of power is creating several challenges too. Nevertheless, balance of power still considered as the better tool for maintaining global peace and security at both regional as well as global levels. In fact, since time immemorial, balance of power had been there in the international system in one form or other to maintain the required status quo as and when required. If we discuss about the methods of maintaining the balance of power, the first one is alliances and counter alliances is the function of the balance of power operating with a multi-stage system. So the rival groups in the balance of power system have three choices in order to maintain, improve their relative power positions. One is they can increase their own power, and the second one is they can add to their power to the power of the other nations, and the third one is they can withhold the power of the other nations from the opponents. So if they make the first choice, they embark upon the armament race. If they make second and third choices, they propose a policy of alliance. Alliances generally lead to counter alliances. When an alliance is specifically or indirectly directed among some times, it is quite natural that they will not remain as silent spectators. And armament and disarmament also define this concept of balance of power. So, power is a relative term which is determined in the context of particular nation or a group of nations. So, um, the direct way of maintaining the balance is to increase one's own power in relation to power of one's opponents. So when there is a great disparity between power position of two nations, if it is not possible for the weaker one to increase its own power to their level of its opponent. This method of maintaining the balance can be resorted to only when there is a rough parity in the power position, the rivals. So like armament and disarmament can resolve the balance of power. One can succeed in the concept of this balance of power. So, but in practice, disarmament as such has rarely been resorted except in case of defeated powers on the conclusion of general war. For example, The effort on the part of the Allied powers after the First World War was keep Germany permanently weak. So, if we discuss about the other methods, the acquisition of territory also decides this concept of balance of power. So, acquisition of fresh territory is also a method of balance of power. This is made possible either by occupying neighboring territories by Israel is considered by the latter as essential for its security and preservation of the balance of power. And also the compensation and the partition also decides this concept of balance of power. When such things occurs, the other side also takes immediate steps to increase own power in compensation in order to preserve the balance. So the partition of Poland and the later on its division between Russia, Prussia, and Austria in a well-known example of the policy compensation and partition. These principles is seen in the division of Germany, Korea, Vietnam. Each great power becomes a beneficiary and weak state their victim. And also there is a concept of creation of buffer states. The creation of a buffer state is also a technique of maintaining of a balancing of power. A buffer state is a natural zone sandwiched between two powerful nations. It is usually weak state. Its function is to keep two giants apart and thus reduce the chances of friction between them. So Poland has been the traditional buffer between Russia and Germany. Tibet has been buffer between China and British India. And thus the buffer state acts as a balancing force between the two powerful rivals because neither of them can allow the other to absorb the buffer. So, but the balance can be also be maintained if the two giants decide to the buffer zone between them. Buffer states have been often vanished this way. And also, if we discuss about the objects of balance of power, there are several objects are there like preservation of independent of nations, aims such distribution of power among the state that no single state or group of states becomes so powerful as to enforce its will upon the others. So each of the big powers will see to it that none of them commits aggression against the small and weaker powers. So according to Taylor, no one state has ever been strong enough to eat up all the rest, and the natural mutual jealousy of the great powers has preserved even the smaller states which could not have preserved themselves. So the preservation of peace is also decides this concept of balance of power. Between peace and security, security will get priority over peace because security is the first condition of peace. If security is in danger, peace shall have to be sacrificed. If big powers start absorbing small ones first, the Second World War advocates the balance of power believed that the balance of power causes peace, and so long as the balance is maintained, peace is assured. If balance is maintained, neither there will be aggressions nor wars, and therefore peace would automatically be established. And also, the maintenance of international law is essential for this concept of balance of power. Regarding the relationship between international law and balance of power, according to Oppenheim writes, balance of power is an indispensable condition of the very existence of international law. A law of nations can exist only if there can be an equilibrium, a balance of power between the members of family of nations. So if we discuss about the relevance of balance of power today, the concept of balance of power has not much its validity in the present day conditions. Its operation is still meaningful as long as the multi-nation state system exists. Balance of power remain as a relevant concept. So after the establishment of international institutions like United Nations organizations, all the nations are bound to maintain the international peace and security. But the superpowers like USA and Britain, France, China are again they fighting for the authority of supreme power in the model state system. So the changes brought about in the international society has removed this type of concept. So if balance of power survives even today, it is because of the fact that an effective substitute has not yet been possible, such as substitute can probably be found out in the effective world organizations, world public opinion, and worldwide acceptance of the obligations of international law. So, but this prospect is very remote. However, according to Palmer and Perkins, believe that balance of power will continue to operate even if supranational world organization is formed. Anyhow, that idea of balance of power is still the central theoretical concept in international relations. So, uh, even all these local and regional wars have affected the balance of power position at the regional level. It would be safer, therefore, to conclude that the balance of terror situation has reduced the validity of the principle of balance of power on a global scale, but has retained it regional level where wars are fought with international weapons. At the global level, balance of power has lost much more if it's reference, but it continues to hold good and regional level relations among nations. So in this way, it continues to be an important controlling mechanism of international politics. So next we have the important concept of collective security. So the collective security is a device of crisis management which postulates a commitment on the part of the nations collectively meet an aggression that may be committed by any state against another. War or aggression is viewed as a breach of international peace and security, and collective security stands for collective action by all the nations in defense of peace. Collective security stands for meeting any war and aggression by the creation of global preparedness of power of all nations against the aggression. So, collective security is also regarded as different against aggression in so far as it lays down that the collective power of all nations will be used to repel aggression or war against any state. It is based on the principle aggression against any one member of the international community is an aggression against international peace and security. As such, it has to be made the collective efforts of all the nations. So, here collective security is commonly regarded as most effective method of maintaining peace and deterring aggression. Collective security was supported not only to be the basis of League of Nations, but it also supposed to be the basis of the United Nations organization. So the collective security is a device by which is securing all the nations in assessed. Under the system of this collective security, aggression or war would no longer be the concern of any individual nation, but would be the concern of all the nations. If we discuss about the meaning and definition of this concept, collective security is a collective measure for security. The word security represents the goal, while the word collective indicates the nature of the combined strength will face the aggression. So the basic principle of collective security is that an attack on one state will be regarded as an attack on all states. Security becomes the concern of all nations, and all will take care collectively of the security of each of them as if their own security were at stake. So, if we simply says that this concept collective security as like American president, former president Woodrow Wilson says like all for one and one for all. So, and also Morgenthau stated the same statement, one for all and all for one is the watchword of collective security. On collective security, Pamela and Perkins says that it clearly implies collective measure for dealing with threat to peace. So the basic principle of collective security is that if an aggression takes place, it should be frustrated by the overwhelming force. It is therefore necessary that all nations must stand unitedly against the aggression. So the principle of collective security is based upon the preponderance of power in the hands of protectors of peace and order, and this is said to be the only basis of the success of the system. So its chief merit lies in the forces may not at all be needed. A threat of collective action will be sufficient to deter the potential aggressor. So if we discuss about the nature of collective security stands for preserving security through collective actions. It's have two elements like security is the chief goal of the all nations. Presently, security of each nation stands inseparably linked by with the security of all the nations. The national security is a part of the international security. Any attack on the security of a nation is in fact an attack on the security of all the nations. So the underlying principle of collective security has been says that one for all and all for one. So aggression or war against any one nation is a war against all the nations. Therefore, all the nations are to act collectively against every war or aggression. So if we discuss about the features or characteristics of this collective security system, a device of power management is collective security. Collective security is a device of power management and or crisis management. It seeks to preserve international peace through crisis management in the event of any war or aggression in the world. And also, collective security accepts the violations of the security of a nation are bound to occur, that wars and aggressions cannot be totally eliminated from international relations. And also, all nations are committed to pool their power for ending aggression. Collective security believes that in the event of a violation of international peace by any aggression in any part of the world, all the nations are committed to pool their power and resources for taking effective steps against every aggression for restoring international peace. And also, collective security stands for the creation of a universal or global preponderance of power involving all the nations for the maintenance of international peace and security. Under it, all the nations are ready to defend international peace and security um, through collective military action against the aggression. And also, collective security presupposes the existence of an international organization under whose flag a global preponderance of power is created for ending the aggression. And also, collective security system is a deterrent against war. So here we say collective security can be an effective deterrent against a state with aggressive designs. Under this system, each nation knows that any aggression against another nation shall be made by the collective power of all other nations. As such, no nation tries to commit aggression and war because it knows that such an action will invite collective security against it. So this realization acts as a deterrent against any war or aggression. Finally, collective security regards aggression or war as the enemy and not the state which may resort uh, to war or aggression. A collective security action is limited to the elimination of war or aggression or threat of war or aggression. So it does not stand for the elimination of the state which commits aggression. Its sole concern is to get the aggression vacated to prevent the aggressor to gain out of its aggression. So to restore the health of the victim of aggression, to restore international peace and security. So as such, collective security stands for securing international uh, peace and security. So security is the common objective of all the nations, and it has to be secured through collective efforts of all. So this is the concept of collective security. So if we differentiate the concept of collective security and balance of power, the balance of power involves the existence of competitive alliances. It assumes a division of states into more or less hostile camps. Balance of power gets operationalized through the policies of major powers that are the key actors. Collective security gets operationalized through the commitment of all nations of the world to act collectively for the sake of international peace and security. In a balance of power system, only a few major powers are involved. They are in agreement to defend certain selected frontiers and not to defend against every aggression or war. In a collective security system, all the nations are committed to figure aggression against the aggressor state. They are in agreement to defend every state against any aggression. So the states seeking a balance of power through alliances assume that their vital interests are common with a few selected states, but not with all the states. But here, collective security system is based upon a general agreement among all the nations in the world. So, in a balance of power system, an environment of fear exists. Contrary to this, the collective security, the basis is the existence of mutual goodwill and cooperation among all states for providing the security of each and every state. So, collective security as an ideal system for management of power is relatively less effective than balance of power. So, if we see the concept of collective security through international organizations, the collective security, first we have defined in the establishment of League of Nations. So the League of Nations is the first institutional effort in 1919 to practice collective security. So the League of Nations was established as part of the provision of incorporated in the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. Article 10 to 16 of the League Covenant deal with the collective security system. But right from the very beginning, the League remained very weak to deal with collective security problems, and it met with a failure. Like the League, the United Nations was established to promote international peace and security on the basis of collective security. Chapter 7 of the United Nations charter and its title reads like action with respect to threats to the peace, breaches of the peace, and acts of aggression. So the United Security Council is authorized to take actions against aggressor in the spirit of collective security. However, critics says that the United Nations collective security operations are disappointing. The limitations and the drawbacks of collective security and the United Nations may be we have observed in many situations in past period. So collective security system wrongly assumes that in the event of an aggression or any nation, the aggressor and the nature of its aggression can be easily identified. In practice, it is very difficult to determine the aggressor and to identify the nature of aggression. So, in international relations, two prominent peace-preserving methods are practiced, namely balance of power and collective security. So, as we discussed, balance of power is a method of balancing the power positions by the major actors. It implies that there is at least a rough equilibrium of power between various nations. in a situation where a large number of nations with varying amount of power exist. So if we see the concept of collective security is a method of maintenance of peace and security by collective actions of all the states against violation of any state. It is a device through which misuse of power by any state against other state is limited by collective power of all the other states in the world. So the collective security concept implies aggressive actions of any state in the world has to be countered by rest of the world with all means and restore peace. So the theory of collective security was incorporated in the chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter. So uh, today I am concluding the session. Tomorrow we will discuss our last chapter, that is peace and security, disarmament and arms control. Thank you for the participation. I am concluding the session.